Welcome back to Igua-Zoo, everyone. Today's episode, we add in the Baird's tapir, South America's largest land mammal. On top of that, we have an update from Justin O'Brien, who's been diligently tracking a herd of alpacas near Igua-Zoo, and we have a quick update on what he's discovered. Now, if you're liking the content, you're really happy with what you're seeing, think about hitting that like button, or leave a comment, or even subscribe. But again, I just want you to remember, there's no pressure to do so. Now that out of the way, you've just seen a quick update on how we've kind of expanded our zoo area. Started off with a blank canvas, added in some pathing and some terraforming, and then added in this really cool looking fence, which you might have seen from our habitat for the giant anteater. Now, I did update it slightly, utilizing some North African logs, which are colorful, and also added some mulch on top of this concrete barrier, which just is going to come in later down in the speed build. Now, on top of that, in each of our habitats, I am trying to focus on creating these iconic South American structures, specifically associated with indigenous people. And what better structure than to maybe create a 3-tier temple? And it's all really just made out of these stone support beams, nothing too fancy, so you can kind of seeing us go through this rather quickly. Now, on top of that, we do need to create a top to it, and we're going to leave the back open. And the idea behind this is it's purely a facade. We're really just trying to draw the guest's attention into the habitat itself. And this is going to work as a great way to add some backdrop. It's going to break up a lot of the sightlines, add a little bit of man-made structure there, and it's just going to add a little bit more flair to the overall build. Now, of course, it's easy to build a stone structure, but we need to kind of rough it up a little bit. And with our stone structure finally coming together, and you can kind of see it here, it's really time to add in a lot of moss. Now, I did add in quite a bit of moss off camera, but the idea is you go through and wherever you want, you just add in a bunch of it. And you can see that I'm using various different forms of this. Again, just trying to make it look a little bit more natural and overgrown. On top of that, adding in some of these plants really just adds to it. Now, we are building it on the grid, but not where it's going to be. And eventually we are going to slide back in there. And really on a whim, I added in this really cool South American fallen log. I love these mossy logs. I'm sad that there's only one that's actually available to this extent. I know that there's some in the construction menu, but that's okay. So with the finishing touches on our iconic structure for this particular habitat, I felt it might be a good time for us to take a quick peek at what's happening in all of our other habitats. Up first, we have our capybara. Our herd have grown to 7, and they're going to continue to grow as capybara normally do. And over at our giant anteater habitat, we have some great news with one offspring to report, although we are running into some sizing issues. And an update from Justin, who has tracked down a missing alpaca. We are on the lookout for the herd, but in the meantime, they've taken residence up in our quarantine section. Now, switching gears to our interior, you can see it looks pretty bland in our den section, and we're going to cheat a little bit on this particular build. In our previous giant anteater habitat, I did create a really awesome looking den backstage. It was a bit small, but I felt that I could really utilize the same build, and I'm quite happy with this. In fact, that being said, I'm a huge fan of building interior sections. You can kind of see everything coming together slowly but surely. Now, if you wanted to see the full build in all of its ugly glory, we actually have a live stream. And speaking of live streams, I'm going to be trying to do regular weekly live streams. And this just gives me an opportunity to hang it with you guys, build together. And if you have any questions or if you want to know how to build something, feel free to ask on the stream. In fact, we actually helped somebody in our community build a really cool looking fence. So cool, in fact, that we might just see this fence end up somewhere in Igau-Zoo as well. On that note, though, there's quite a bit of work that has to go into repurposing this particular blueprint. And speaking of blueprints, expect to see this at some point on the workshop, because I'm really a big fan of how this den is working. So I did mention that we had to repurpose this particular blueprint, and mostly it's because our initial build was a little too small, and with the Baird's Tapir, they are going to be a little bit larger, especially with that hitbox, so everything has to be a little larger as well. So our den area itself will also have 2 chutes. We're going to have an employee facing area. This will be where our employees enter. That's going to be off to our left. And then we're going to have an animal chute, which is going to be off to our right. This is how they're going to have access to the habitat itself. And then again, on the left, you can see that we've repurposed some doors again, just to make it seem like our staff can enter from a safe direction, as opposed to necessarily going into the chute. Now that all said and done, let's take a look at how everything's changed. So you can definitely see a much more atmospheric den for our new Baird's Tapir. And for our front facing area, you can see that we've updated this as well, adding in a few knickknacks and a roof with some additional lighting. For the rest of this episode, we're going to be focusing on a speed build of all of the foliage, and really the star of the show today is going to be this bracken, which I haven't really utilized a whole lot. So you're going to see a lot of bracken work here, more so because it's going to give it that really lush foresty look that we want to associate with being in South America. Now, that being said, in the comments below, for the sake of engagement, maybe leave your star of the show when it comes to foliage. What's your favorite foliage piece? And remember, this is a judgment-free zone, so feel free to place any foliage that you think should belong in planetzoo or that is already in planetzoo and is your favorite piece. Now, the goal for this build today was really to create something that was going to be super lush. And I realized that's really hard, for me anyway, because I'm dealing with a whole new palette, and even though I've built a few habitats already in Igua-Zoo, I'm still learning things. And I think you can see that purely just by utilizing the bracken so differently than I'm used to. Now, before we kind of continue with the rest of the foliage build, I did forget one thing, which was the one entire side of this build. So I kind of cheated a little bit. We're reutilizing a lot of these rock walls, and then to kind of cap it off, to make sure that it's going to look cohesive, I utilized one of these temple large stone walls. It is damaged, so utilizing one of these pieces and then copying another one over here kind of marries the idea that this was a temple area, and it fits with the entire theme that we're building. On top of that, I did have to extend our fence over just a little bit more, but overall it looks really cohesive. And I want you to remember, sometimes you're going to make a mistake or forget something. Don't worry, it's really easy for you to correct, and oftentimes it's going to look really cool, much like what we're seeing happen here. So with that small mistake fixed, it was really time for us to turn back to our habitat and make sure that we create it as really lush as possible. Now, I did mention earlier I wasn't really too familiar with the entire foliage pack for South America, and I'm still learning some things, so you kind of get to see it happen in all of its ugly glory. Now, in the meantime, let's talk a little bit more about the Baird's tapir, because there's a reason why you're seeing this rather large lake at the very beginning of our habitat. And it's not because I didn't know what to do with this habitat. In fact, it's because the Baird's tapir is an excellent swimmer, and that's surprising considering how bulky they are. So I felt that why not add in some water for them to explore. This also works as a great way for them to escape predators. They can also forage some water plants. And what's really cool, and I find super interesting, is they have a prehensile nose, which they often use as a snorkel when they're swimming underwater. So think of it like a miniature elephant. Now, I'm also going to admit that I kind of made a mistake in this habitat. We're seeing a lot of mistakes happen, actually, and that's kind of funny. But Baird's tapirs are typically solo dwellers. They normally run on their own, and we actually have two tapirs for this habitat, a male and a female. And side note, if you have some name recommendations for our new tapirs, please leave them in the comments below. But they only really have young, and then they'll travel with their young at those times, and that's normal. But typically, they're always running on their own. So we're making a little bit of a artistic decision to have two tapirs in this particular habitat. Now, lastly, the Baird's tapir is also known as a gentle giant. Despite their really hefty size and appearance, they're actually really gentle and they're quite shy. And this usually means that when they're provoked by an aggressive animal, they're actually more often likely to flee than actually confront it. So this also meant that I had to make sure there was lots of little hiding places for them to run into and to take a little bit of a break. So they do have that backstage area, but I really wanted to make this as lush and as full of foliage as possible. Now you're also going to notice right here that I kind of did a mistake. Again, another mistake rears its head. I didn't really know what I wanted to do from a foliage perspective, and I had spent so many hours building this. I wanted to try placing some buffalo grass. And I realized buffalo grass is not native to South America, which really kind of bothers me because I loved utilizing this piece. But this is going to be one of only two very small areas that you're going to see some of this grass. I also tried something with this thick seed as well. I flipped it upside down and I got this really cool looking design. It almost kind of looks like grassy moss. So I tried to place that around some places, but I was really trying to explore and try different techniques to fill this in. And that was before I went a little crazy with all of our bracken that you're seeing being placed down. Now, we're pretty much at the end of the speed build, really just a few more minutes left of just a lot of foliage and kind of pulling everything together. Lots of different techniques were utilized in this build, and I think that's really what's important when you play planetzoo, is you try new things and you explore new ways of building something, because that's how you get better. So if you're going to take one piece of advice away from this entire build, try something new today and build something interesting. And if you want, feel free to share it with me or the community. And speaking of the community, you're going to see a pinned comment below with a link to our Discord server. And that's right, we actually have a Discord server and we're growing. We have over 100 people who've come in and they're hanging out with us, talking all things planetzoo amongst other games. And if you want to join in, show some of your builds, maybe get some feedback or advice from anybody, then feel free to head on over. And remember, anybody's welcome to hang out with us in our Discord. Now, on top of that, while you're down there, maybe think about hitting that like button and that subscribe button, or even leaving a comment. And don't forget, we are looking for some names for our Baird's Tapir. So 1 male and 1 female. Feel free to leave in the comment below. And at the end of the week, we're going to vote on what names we want to see for both of our tapirs. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about what's going to be next for the channel. I'm trying to ramp up what I'm doing with planetzoo among some other few games that you're going to see pop up from time to time, but you're going to start seeing schedules on a weekly basis uploaded. And this is going to let you know when I'm live streaming, what I'm live streaming, as well as the next episode that you could expect to come out. And this is going to include Igua-Zoo, Maplewood Ranch, and yes, Cedarbrook Park Zoo as well. And this is all because you guys have shown interest in my channel and what I'm doing today. So keep that in mind. I really appreciate all of the support and kind words that everybody shared. Now, as we're coming close to the end of these overall speed build, kind of wanted to share with you some of my thoughts and processes for this overall build from a foliage perspective. In previous episodes, I've gotten a lot of feedback, which I really appreciate, in letting me know that maybe our foliage was just a little too heavy-handed, putting too much there, making it look too busy. So in an effort to kind of break it up a little bit, tone down the amount of foliage that I'm utilizing, I went with the concept of having foliage plots. And what I mean by that is having specific areas that are going to be really foliage heavy, and this is going to give it the idea that we're in a forest without necessarily having to have lots of really heavy-handed foliage everywhere. And I know that that's something I struggle with. So feedback for myself, remember, you don't need to go crazy with foliage to make something that's going to look really cool. Sometimes you just have to be strategic about where you place your foliage. So that's it. That's all you're going to get from me today. And thank you for sticking around this long in this video. I really appreciate it. Of course, stick around until the very end. You're going to see some cinematic shots of our new Baird's Tapir habitat in all of its beautiful glory. And I'm going to use the word again, lush glory as well. Otherwise, I just want to say again, thank you so much for your support. And as always, ciao for now, everybody.